Rosecrest Cemetery has been home to thousands of bodies since its inception in 1823. Most inhabitants are just that, bodies, but some are not quite gone from this earth. Florence Elizabeth Byrne is one of them. Confined to the boundary of Rosecrest, Florence is destined to roam the grounds for the rest of forever, or until she decides to move on. But for now, she's perfectly content to spend her nights in isolation or visiting lost souls in the fringe, constantly dodging matriarchal tyrant Josephine Everlay and flirtatious Frenchman Sylvain Beaumont, until Luca Williams is buried. In a moment of uncharacteristic weakness, Florence finds herself feeling sorry for the newly deceased young man, and what's worse, agrees to help him uncover the truth of his death. But that means contending with the calculated Josephine and invoking Sylvain's jealous wrath. It also means coming to terms with her own demise for the first time in a century. Set against the lush backdrop of a sprawling southern cemetery, this modern Gothic tale proves that self-discovery and forgiveness can transpire even after life is over. Hello, it's me! Welcome to the video! One I have been waiting to make for like 3 to 4 years. It's been so long since I started Cherub of Rosecrest, which is right here. This is my final proof copy. I can't get a real one without the watermark until the book is published, which stay tuned to the end of the video because I will let you know about the release date and how you can pre-order a digital book if you're so interested. Little intro you just heard is actually the blurb for the book. I know whilst I've been editing and writing, I've sprinkled little bits of information here and there, but this is like the definitive, like pretty much all you need to know to decide if you want to read it or not. First thing is first though, we need to kind of take this back, and not just the beginning of my first draft or outlining or deciding that I wanted to write the story, but we're gonna take it back to the 3rd grade. How old are you in the 3rd grade? 9, 8-year-old me. And if you've been here for a minute, you might have, I don't know, kind of connected some dots that I have a thing for cemeteries. I don't know how this came about. I don't know why it's so morbid, but it's something that has always fascinated me. In a video I made, I think in 2020, I talked about one of my first ever stories that felt like a real story that I, in my mind, can actually remember writing and being proud of. It's called The Graveyard, and it's basically about 2 siblings who lose their dog in a graveyard and then zombies chase them and then they make it out, but there's like a twist ending. It's a wild ride. I feel like that story was really heavily inspired by Goosebumps by, who's it, R.L. Stine. I loved reading the books as a kid and I loved watching the TV series. Additionally, as I got a little bit older, I really liked the Graveyard book by Neil Gaiman. I just thought it was so fascinating and it was such a strange journey, and to this day I think it's just a very unique book. Fast forward a bit to young adulthood. I can't remember which project it was that I was working on. It must have been The Scum at the End of the Road, I think. Or maybe it was Notes from a Wicked Child, where I just kind of got in this like slump. I took a break and I found myself wandering around this little cemetery in my town. Inspiration hit me and I wrote a poem and I made a video about it. That sparked something. I can't exactly pinpoint it, but the idea started flowing and I remembered, you know, my graveyard story, and I remembered the Graveyard book, and I remembered being really into like weird morbid stuff when I was younger. After I wrote that poem and when I decided to go back to school, I took a creative writing English class, and one of the short stories that I wrote for it was loosely based or inspired by the poem. So the poem was called What We Do in Cemeteries, and the short story I wrote had title of the same name, but it was a lot closer to what Cherub turned out to be. I talk more about it in my first DecoRimo video, which in December of 2020 I decided to create my own National Novel Writing Month, and this is a story that I wrote during that time. It's part of the Cherub playlist too, I'll link that above. But I remember specifically my professor at the time when I was writing this story, it might have been like 1,500 words or less, or 1,000 words even, but even she made the comment like, this story feels like you're writing to discovery, because the more I wrote, the more kind of like doors opened up and the more potential she saw in it. I agreed with her wholeheartedly. And even when I first set out to write Cherub, I thought it was going to be something similar to The Scum at the End of the Road, a very linear story, a very cut and straightforward one. I felt like I was writing to discovery for, I don't know, the entire time I wrote it. There were several key pivotal moments while writing that kind of changed the trajectory, and when I realized like this thing was gonna be bigger than I thought it would be, but not so big as to introduce a lot of new elements. Like it's fairly contained. I'll get into the specifics in a bit, but the physical book, it's only like 160 pages. It's a very self-contained story, and it is somewhat linear. There is not a wide cast of characters by any means, but I feel like I expanded upon them more than I originally thought I would. And part of that is because I challenged myself in a couple different ways that I was not anticipating when I first started. First of all, if you remember the video where I said I was switching to third person, I think I had written the entire thing in first person, and I'd started editing when I was like, this would be so much better in third person. I think I rewrote like a chapter or a scene in third person, and I was like, oh my god, like this is it. And for me, I had been writing in first person since like high school. When I was a kid, writing stories, they were always in third person because I feel like a lot of kids books and grade school books are written in third person. A lot of the books that I read as a kid was third person, past tense. And when I discovered that present tense was a thing, I was like, oh my god, this is perfect. And then when I discovered first person was a thing, I was even more psyched for it. So that was just always comfortable for me to write in first person present. And then I guess I let myself go back, and I let myself be like, you know what? Let's try it in third person, let's see how it goes, and I'm so glad I did. I think this story just lends itself to third person, partly because it is a very setting heavy book. A lot of my stories tend to be focused on characters and their relationships, but this story, there was more to that. There was that supernatural element of I'm writing about people who died in bunches of different times, and the cemetery itself is their world. You know, they cannot go outside of the confines of the cemetery. They only have each other to interact with, which could get very, very boring, except that the setting itself is so interesting and oddly dynamic that it created like this whole other element that I wasn't originally anticipating. Another kind of oddity that I found myself facing was that there isn't like a true romantic relationship. A lot of my stories feature romantic relationships in some form or another, and this one has very platonic but strongly connected characters. And I knew that kind of going in. I played with the idea of two of my characters getting involved romantically, kind of like on screen, falling for each other together and making it official by the end of the story, you know, with like a kiss or what have you. As I was writing, and I realized like this story, it would just be too much. You know, the story would need to be longer because these two people, they have no reason to fall in love right now. They have the rest of eternity together, and there's no reason for them to go from complete strangers to laying down their dead lives for each other by the end of a 165 page book. I think that was a really good choice for these characters because of their histories, and I like the way I ended it in the book. So to get down to the nitty-gritties, I self-published with KDP's Kindle Direct Publishing. My word count ended at 38,460 words, thereabouts. So a short novel, yes, but feels longer than a novella. My cover is 5.25 by 8. I went for the matte cover. I went for cream pages, black and white. I wrote everything in Word. I formatted everything in Word, which I have a handy dandy tutorial that even I still go back to. The fonts I used for the body, it's called PS Foreigner STD Petite. For my title font, it's called Ambroise STD Francois Demi. For my cover, I took the actual photo of this cherub. I visited a botanical garden and they had tons of pictures of statues. They had tons of statues around the place, and I just started taking pictures, looking for inspiration, and I found this little guy. I went back and forth with several different angles and finally settled on like the front facing one. The background, it's kind of like a green ivy wall. I used two websites. I can't remember which I got this specific photo from. I used Pexels and Pixabay. They are great resources for free to use, copyright free type of images. It's very important to make sure that everything you use for print and digital. You either pay for the rights for, or it is covered by a license. I really wanted to kind of blend like old Gothic to sort of new contemporary. I played around with lighting, this like glitchy effect and kind of like neon, because Rosecrest, the people there are frozen in time, even though the cemetery moves on and grows and evolves. And it's like this weird balance of old and new, and I wanted to do my best to convey that on the cover. And that's pretty much it. You know, it's hard to talk about something without giving a lot away, but I think the blurb does a good job. You know, you get our main characters. Once the book is live on Amazon, you should be able to read like the first chapter or something like that as a preview. I am in the process of creating a project page on my website for Cherub, so it goes in depth. I'm gonna be featuring the map that didn't make it into the book, and I like to talk about like processes and stuff like that on my website, so look out for that. And as far as release dates go, consider this a special Valentine's Day gift from me to you, because Cherub of Rosecrest will be released on February 14th, 2024, in a few, like a week-ish. If you would like to pre-order the ebook now, you can do so. There's a link. I'll link it down below. You can't pre-order physical books as of yet on Amazon, so if you're an ebook reader, that'll be for you. If not, just stay tuned and, you know, the link will pop up somewhere at some point. But yeah, I cannot believe this chapter of my life is coming to a close. I wrote this in the midst of a pandemic, and I'm just now finishing it right when the world is kind of going back to itself, and I feel like I'm finding myself again. And it's also crazy to think that soon I'm going to be starting a new project, and it's just time to do it all over. I love it. So yeah, thank you so much for sticking with me through this journey, and if you're new, hi, welcome. As always, good luck with whatever project you are working on at the moment, whether it's writing, it's editing, whether it's formatting at this point, or just brainstorming really. Like, I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.